the scenery outside reminds me of my pride, reminds me of my will. At the windowsill, I sit and see the grays, the children they all play and laugh amongst themselves. Somehow remind me of myself on the merry-go-round.
What's going on, YouTube? It is Trev. As you can see, I'm not in my usual surroundings, right? I've been spending some time, my fiance and I, getting together one of our apartments that are vacant, getting it ready for rental. So I spent a little time doing that today, but most of the day I've just kind of been chilling downstairs, and she and her mother have been up there doing a lot of cleaning. So I've had a little time on my hands, right? I didn't want to jump on Twitter. I just really wanted to separate from a lot of the things that, we've been working on lately with Lonk and Lunatics Token and everything else that I'm doing. So I finally jumped on Chat GPT. Now, I've been on it before. I played with it a little bit, and I know I'm a little late to the game. Everybody has done a video at this point on Chat GPT, but I spent enough time with it today to finally form some sort of perspective on it, or to have some sort of review for it. Right, a couple things that I realized about it. I had some philosophical conversations with it today, which was really kind of cool because what you get back is a lot of pure logic, right? But I also noticed that there's absolutely like you can tell that it was programmed by someone, right? And maybe you can't help when you're programming this thing. Maybe you can't help but instill it with some sort of ethical or moral bent, according to, your own particular morals, right? So a couple conversations I had with it. I started off talking to it or asking it questions about my heritage, which is, really kind of weird, to be honest with you. A lot of my own people don't understand or don't know the ethos of our people. And I'm Cape Verdean. I think I've said it before in a few videos. And a lot of Cape Verdeans don't really understand what Cape Verdean is or where we came from. So if I'm to explain this really quickly, think about, and I don't mean to put it like this, but think about like a dog breed, right? There are some dog breeds. You got German Shepherds. You got, some collie. You got some pretty pure breeds. But then a long time ago, there were some breeds that were mixed together to form other breeds, like a bulldog, for instance, right? And they've been around so long that they are now their own breed, but they weren't an original breed. They were an amalgamation of other breeds, right? It's kind of the same thing with Cape Verdean people. So, you had the islands, the Cape Verdean Islands, and, whatever. They didn't really have a name at this point, but Portuguese explorers discovered these islands. They were totally uninhabited. There was no one there. But they found that it was a really good spot to stop off, as they're traveling kind of here and there, right? So this was all during the slave trade days, right? And what they did was they took slaves from Africa, they brought them there, and, they had them working the land, farming, doing all these things. But there was also a lot of, whatever you want to call it, commingling, right? There were families and such that were kind of created. Some of these Portuguese sailors, they had their families back in Portugal, but they had another one over in the islands that nobody knew about, right? And that went on for years. It went on for a long time, to the point where between Portuguese and other European influences, African influence, even some Latin influences, the Cape Verdean people came about until, Cape Verde gained its independence, blah, 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 right? But basically, that's really what it came down to. There were Portuguese people who brought slaves over, and in a lot of cases, they raped them. They did, they forced them to have, kids and do whatever, which is the stuff that happened during slave days, right? So I talked to GPT about it, because you won't find those kind of details on Wikipedia. You won't find those kind of details in most of your history books, right? It's usually a lot of that stuff is washed out. So I wanted to know what this thing knew. And surprisingly, it was very, very accurate. And it actually went there with me, right? It told me all about the Portuguese explorers and what they did. I questioned it on the actual, if what was going on was ethical and stuff. And they told me in a lot of cases, it really wasn't. There wasn't any consent, and these people, my Cape Verdean heritage was born out of this kind of tragedy, right? It actually had the conversation with me, and it didn't sugarcoat it at all, which I found really, really cool, right? So then I wanted to test it a little bit more, and I said, well, let's go with something that's maybe a little more universal, well-known, and maybe a little more controversial, and I decided to chat with it about religion. Just my own background, I kind of a reformed Christian, I guess, right? Sang on the worship team, taught Bible study, all that stuff, right? But I for whatever reasons, I moved away from that because I kind of educated myself and found that I didn't really agree with a lot of things, right? So I've studied things like the Council of Nicaea and Constantine, Emperor Constantine, and where actually a lot of Christian beliefs come from, right? And I don't mean to, cause any kind of, debate here on anything. I wanted to have this conversation with this machine and see what it would tell me. So we got into a lot of the origins of Christianity. We got into, if anybody knows anything about this stuff, the Nicene Creed, and a lot of the morality and ethical things that go along with Christianity and just religion as a whole. And I found that it wouldn't go there with me so much when it came to religion. So I began to understand that whoever it was that programmed this thing, like I said, you probably can't help but program it with your kind of your own moral code, right? And I would have it reach conclusions, right? And it could reach 3 conclusions, and I was trying to lead it to something. I'm trying to get it to say something, and it would reach 3 conclusions, and I would say, okay, well, given all those conclusions, A plus B plus B, A plus B plus C has to equal D, right? Well, it could equal D, but blah, 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 blah. And it kept sugarcoating everything. I found it very, very fascinating. So there's something about this AI that I think will never really be what we actually expect it to be. At least at this current phase, it doesn't really have the ability to learn and extrapolate from what it learns, okay? Because again, it's giving me conclusions, and it doesn't have the ability to put those conclusions together and reach the next logical conclusion. It just doesn't, right? And it will not, in certain circumstances, it will not just be blunt and logical with its replies. It sugarcoats them, and it takes almost a very PC, a very politically correct stance with the way it answers some things. It's very human in that way, right? And it's not developing this on its own. This is the way it was programmed. So it can never really understand the human condition. it will never understand the quanta, I think they call it, right? Um, the little things that make us what we are. I tried to deal with it with some humor, and maybe some dark humor, and it wouldn't go there. It kept telling me that it understood, what humor was and how necessary it was, but there were certain things that you just shouldn't joke about, right? And there, these were things that I brought up that we kind of all joke about. And like I said, it might have been kind of dark, right? But it's not able to go there. It's not really able to understand that. Okay, so it's got a long way to go before we get to Skynet. Right? It's not ready to take over yet. But I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to actually play with it and get some of the answers that it gave, and to see exactly how intelligent it was. I could not get into. I didn't even bother trying to get into stocks or crypto or anything like that with it, because I know that the AI, it's really outdated. Like its information, its data is outdated. It's not currently up to date. It doesn't have the ability to read what's on the internet right now. If you gave it a website, it doesn't have the ability to read through it and understand what's on it. It only knows what it's been programmed with, and it's been programmed with a lot, but it's outdated, right? So I could only talk to it about things that it would have known a couple years ago or whatever. But I found it fascinating. I really think, if you haven't got on there and played with it yet, get on there and play with it. It's a lot of fun. I had it write a poem for my fiance for Valentine's Day, and I had it write it in Portuguese because she's Portuguese. It wrote it in Brazilian Portuguese, which, some might argue isn't real Portuguese, right? And, it wrote your regular quintessential Valentine's Day thing, all romantic and gushy and everything. All of the things that my fiance is not. If I had ever written this for her, she would have laughed at it and threw it back at me. But it's still a lot of fun to play with, so I recommend giving it a shot. But anyway, that's my review on Chat GPT. We're in no danger of being taken over by AI yet, but it's getting there. It's getting there. It's really cool. All right, that's it. That's all I wanted to talk. I wanted to talk about something light today, so that's what we did. And I'll chat with you about some more stuff pretty soon. All right, y'all. Ciao.